welcome to Get Serious here. Trying to squeeze in a recording right before flying out to the affiliate workshop for acquisition.com from Alex Ramosie's Money Models book launch here. Super excited to be heading out there. I'm sure I'll get a lot of takeaways, and just wanted to mention got a ton of feedback from that Florida DK scam article and podcast that had prepped, and a number of you mentioning that you've dealt with fraudsters and scams also in the past, even recently, and unfortunately some of you guys had transactions that went fully through, so that actually deal with title claim nonsense and kind of unwinding. So we were fortunate to avoid that, but again, it's a tricky industry. Got to be careful out there. A lot of unsavory individuals. So I appreciate you all sharing some of your other stories. And I know some of you guys asked for the AI prompt that we're using now to confirm, or at least get as close to confirming IDs as possible with some AI image analysis. So I will be preparing that for the following article. I just want to make it a little bit more general and robust versus just the very specific one we did for our situation. So I want to give you something better and more generally applicable. So appreciate you all asking about that as well. And then today I was just reviewing, I was reviewing a few deals over the weekend here, and including one today, which was a higher priced commercial property in North Carolina. That seems pretty solid. A bit over an acre, and probably reliably would have a exit pricing of 700K ish approximately. But the problem is that there's just really extensive permitting and delays that go into that, so that even if we were priced to identify a buyer within even a couple months of listing, and I actually wouldn't be that surprised. It's commercial properties, we've been burned on them in the past before, usually very skeptical, lower smaller buyer pool generally, and you got to really make sure you're having a property that actually makes sense and can be comped appropriately. Like, commercial properties are just on average harder to assess, and the data quality is rarely as good as a resi or recreational or even ag properties for the most part. But in this case, there did seem to be a pretty healthy market, and again, folks were sending us some comps that were even 2 or 3 years old, which we just throw out. You just can't. I know commercial properties can be lacking in terms of comps, but again, especially in this market, anything beyond 12 months lagging, honestly more than 6 months lagging, just has to be viewed with significant skepticism before potentially purchasing. So we just want to be mindful of that. But even accounting for a bit more recent sales, there was a pretty solid market for it. It's rare. Usually a lot of commercial properties sent our way, there's some key characteristics wrong with it, or it's just mispriced entirely, very slow market, or nothing moving commercially. You could be looking at multiple years on the market. In this case, it wasn't. But even if it could sell for 700, maybe a bit more, some of the realtors associated with it thought it could go for a bit more. I would be more conservative in terms of looking at the other comps that were available there. But like I mentioned before, even if you could find a buyer relatively quickly, the DD period is going to be significant, and full close won't happen until they can get everything permitted and kind of site plan in place and so forth, which best case seemed to be 10-ish months, maybe worst case closer to 18 months. So it could be a really significant hold time, especially if one of these deals falls apart and you have to restart that whole process. You'd have to just bake in a super conservative timeline to sell. So I would be thinking, this could possibly be a 2-year full hold, even if we thought pretty positively about this property, which we're not going to rule out. Again, in this market, I think you have to be creative. It just, you have to price the risk appropriately. So in this case, This seller who had bought the property for 400K a bit over 10 years ago, some medical situation and, wants 450K within 2 weeks to close. And these are the type of situations we look for. Again, distress in the market, motivated sellers, low market value, off market deals. Like, this is the bread and butter of the land industry. And if it was more conservatively valued at like 900K to $1 million, like, that could potentially make more sense. And even if it could sell for that amount, like, I wouldn't bet on that looking at the comps. And it was even hard to assess the comps because it looks like most comps were selling off market too. So I couldn't even see how long the market timing was as well, and throwing in some additional discounts. So like, I, again, more conservatively estimated 650 to 700K to exit this thing. So even right off the bat, like an initial possible purchase, we would want to be, getting the seller closer to like 350. But accounting for, an anticipated very long hold time, even if we found a buyer and we're under contract, but if it's like a year plus hold time, we could do that. But I would want to price that risk more appropriately. So, we went back to the land investor who sent us the deal, and I was like, hey, if you could get this guy to, we know this seller is motivated, right? I mean, how much, the medical expenses, I mean, they're $500,000. Can we get a bit lower than that? Being mindful of the situation, like, but also just explaining like these super long hold times, tricky market, etc. Can we do $250,000? If you can anchor this guy at 250K, where for sure we would not lose money on the deal, but even if we're holding it for a while, taxes are between like 5 to 6K per year too. So you build in at least some holding costs to the deal. So just being mindful of that, but being able to price risk appropriately is one of the best skill sets in business. And there's just a lot of folks don't do it properly. Sometimes we've definitely done it wrong as well too. Just to note, like the transactional deal, picking up pennies in front of a steamroller that we've nearly exited out of as of this anticipated next week, for instance. So there's constant learning lessons there too. But again, especially in this market, and there's distress and motivation on the sidelines here. Like, you have to be able to explain these situations to the seller. And if something is going to be at least a year-long hold, like, it has to be a better deal. Plus, being a commercial property, if we can get it closer to 30-ish% of conservative market value, then that's going to actually make it a lot more attractive. Doing a 50% deal or even a bit more than 50% type deal, even with higher absolute value, just doesn't make any sense. Again, especially in a more difficult real estate market on average nationally at the moment. Just wanted to mention that there, give you some insight into our thinking on, again, how to appropriately price risk. Keep this in mind within your own business for various acquisitions here. Like, don't get pushed around by sellers. I know they're going to have their own obligations to take care of, and it's hard to get your marketing dollars to work. Mail, cold call type, like, it's all more competitive here. But people are looking for $500,000 cash in less than 2 weeks. I push back on that. We can get you some solid cash, but like, there's not that many financiers out there that can produce 6-figure checks on a routine basis. So if you got to cut that even close to half and still get $250,000 in cash to fund your medical expenses, could be pretty interesting there. So figure out how to negotiate these deals better, and we can all potentially make a lot more money and still get the sellers what they need. It's just a route of doing business where every party gets what they're looking for. So hopefully this one is helpful today here. SeriousLand.capital for any funding needs. Land Daily Diligence Facebook group. A few more folks are sending some deals here. I won't get back to it until Thursday. Obviously going to Hormozy's thing today. flying out, and then landpricer.ai pushing for more data parsing. Had a bigger meeting with a potential partner earlier today as well, keeping things moving forward. It's reliable land pricing on the market. With that, subscribe and share, everybody. Take care now. Talk to you next time. Bye.